Martin Scorsese said last year that streaming is the biggest revolution to film since the use of sound, and it's very hard to argue with that claim. The cosmic shift to how studios, creatives, production companies, and the industry itself approaches content has completely changed in the last decade. The stranglehold of cinemas and scheduled TV listings have been completely cannibalised by the event of streaming in a very similar way the printed press was with the come up of the internet in the early 2000s. The internet birthed the audience's desire and programmed them for an on-demand, instant gratification approach to their external entertainment, which streaming services now provide, and Netflix can certainly be viewed as the service that opened up this can of worms that their competitors are now replicating. What started as an unassuming DVD rental by mail service slowly transformed and expanded itself in the streaming platform we know today back in 2007, believe it or not. I remember hearing movie podcasts back then in the late 2000s that were talking awe about this new service that somehow let you watch movies right then and there, just like YouTube, and thinking to my 14-year-old self that this would be a big deal. I just didn't know how quickly this monster would be created. I was personally first intrigued by Netflix when they first started producing their own content, and not just relying on content they licensed from other studios. Their coming out party and debut series would be the political thriller House of Cards, which starred Kevin Spacey and was helmed by David Fincher. With those two huge industry names attached, the quick critical acclaim, and the seismic shift it represented, I made my Netflix account so I won't get left behind, which I still had to this day. I enjoyed House of Cards. It looked as good if not better than the prestige HBO shows at the time, production level wise anyway. It had a lot of great established and soon to be established stars delivering great performances. The writing and dialogue was smart and sharp. It wasn't the best show around, but it was a very promising start for the new coin Netflix Originals initiative, and with Netflix establishing themselves as producing content that was of respectable quality, I was hyped to see what's to come in the next few years. 7 years later, I still have my Netflix account, but I often wonder why I do. I guess it's that their library is ever evolving and changing, and there might be some great films and TV shows coming and going, but it's certainly not me committing and laying down my money to wait for the next Netflix original film or TV show, as most of them are disposable, mediocre, throwaway trash. I mean, what the hell happened here? Sure, there's some diamonds in the rough which I'll get to, but that promise which House of Cards and even Orange is the New Black established back in 2013 has not been fulfilled, and instead replaced with an orgy of ultra-cheap comedies, straight-to-DVD level action movies that somehow attract big stars to disguise themselves as being credible, repugnant quote-unquote reality shows, unremarkable Oscar bait, and just a plethora of average to below average content that far outweighs the good. Now I know most other TV productions, channels and streaming services have plenty of bad content too, but compared to other American broadcasting services and channels such as HBO, AMC, Showtime, hell, even at this stage Amazon Prime, Netflix has no excuse for the amount of money they make and the leverage they have to pull A-level talent to dish out such middling and embarrassing content. I mean, when Netflix presented itself as a platform to fund and distribute the newest Adam Sandler comedies 5-6 years ago, I knew we were in trouble. I mean, look how cheap this looks, it's barely above porn production level. It's clear it's took the opposite strategy of HBO, whose selling point is simply producing above the line great programming, and instead took the old quantity over quality approach. I mean, the amount of Netflix originals that are made is constant and overwhelming, but don't get too attached to the hours of time you invested in the show you're watching because most of the series get cancelled midway through, which is a big problem. The Marvel series like Daredevil, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, etc. were probably the biggest and most known victim of Netflix's pattern to cancel seemingly successful shows coldly out the blue. Now all these shows suffered from not only a swift cancellation, which I'll get to in a minute, but Netflix's desire to have 13 episodes for each season, which is simply too many episodes for these shows, and the show's momentum is constantly stalled by having several filler episodes to hit the 13 episode mark. Therefore, all these shows' potential was stalled by severe pacing problems and multiple uninteresting subplots that don't go anywhere, that were inserted for the sole purpose of filling time. Even the strongest of the bunch, Daredevil, I can't call great, as it has so much filler put in it. And it's not just the Marvel TV shows that suffer from having too many episodes per season. A lot of other shows are affected, which shows the drawback of the quantity over quality approach, which I'll expand on. But back to the sudden cancellations that Netflix makes to its originals. Marco Polo, which had Netflix's biggest production at the time, was axed after its second season. Sense8, which had the big names of the Wachowskis behind it, was axed in its second season. The OA, despite being the service's more acclaimed drama, was axed in its second season. And there are many other examples of this happening in Netflix's still short reign as streaming king. Why is this? Well, an article from The Deadline has this to say: I hear at least some of these cancellations on the list were prompted in part because the shows were deemed to have gotten too expensive. That is because of how many of Netflix's series deals are structured. It is widely known that Netflix employs a cost-plus model, offering to pay upfront for a show's production costs, plus a premium of 30% of the costs. Even after Netflix subtracts a distribution fee, outside studios at break-even or even a positive territory from day one, versus having a deficient finance series for the first few seasons on most traditional networks. But in exchange for the upfront payments, outside studios give up the potential upside that normally comes with owning a long-running successful series, including off-network and international sales. Instead, Netflix deals include bump bonuses after each season that are getting progressively bigger. While the payments are relatively modest after season 1 and a little bigger after season 2, I hear they escalate after season 3, especially for series owned by Netflix. Sometimes from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars as these studios pay off the show's back end. For series from outside studios, which I hear cost 20% more than Netflix produced counterparts, I hear the built-in payment increases do not skyrocket as much, but still are bigger after season 3, season 4 and beyond. This isn't the best model for making long-term content if you're not ready to spend more money as the show grows in popularity. So instead they'll just make a few other shows at a cheaper price, which again, the quantity over quality approach is just so sabotaging, not only to themselves, but the audience's motivation to pick up a new show. I know I can't tell myself to get properly invested in something I know there's a big chance it will get binned. Even a stronger show that I was watching, such as Mindhunter, I know not to get too attached, as recent reports suggest that the future of the show's continuation looks bleak. So instead of building on the shows they have garnered an audience and shelling out the money to do so, they'd rather invest in the next underwhelming mid-budget dystopian sci-fi movie, like they haven't got a dumpster filled with them already. I can pretty much count on one hand, or maybe two, the amount of very good to great Netflix original shows: BoJack Horseman, House of Cards, Mindhunter, Narcos, Ozark, Dark, and that's about it really. In its 7-year history, with all of its money and resources, that's not great, and you may enjoy other shows on the service, and my opinion isn't the final say obviously, but I can only say from my perspective that Netflix has severely underperformed content-wise. Now on the movie front, Netflix has seemingly become the place for would-be straight-to-DVD horror, action, comedy movies to home. Cheap-looking and feeling disposable flicks that you forget the instant the credits roll, which talk you in by having big names such as Chris Hemsworth and Charlize Theron as their stars to have a fake Hollywood sheen to them. I mean, look how cheap these look. They're off-putting, soulless, overly digital cameras they're shot on, and the spamming of drone shots has almost established itself as a horrible genre by itself. Luckily, the last few years, Netflix has made some encouraging steps to up their film game and their artistic integrity by recruiting respected and decades-established movie auteurs to come and ply their trade, such as Martin Scorsese with The Irishman, the Coen brothers with The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, Alfonso Cuarón with Roma, and the soon-to-be-released Mank by David Fincher. But where's the curation of new talent and directional voices? Even Uncut Gems, which was made by the young and upcoming Safdie brothers, was only distributed by Netflix and not produced. Surely they'd want to take the same approach long-term as A24 have and become the home of introducing new and diverse directional voices to the world, as that studio has with the Safdies, Robert Eggers, Ari Aster, Barry Jenkins, Greta Gerwig, among others. And Netflix being a way more bigger institution compared to A24, they easily could. It's not like the films these directors make cost a lot of money, but for whatever reason they don't, and rely on the old heads instead to give them recognition they strive for. It's not very healthy long term, but not a lot of Netflix does is healthy long term. I hope in the near future as time goes on they change not only their release strategies but reverse their quantity over quality ideology. They're huge and making a lot of money right now, but there's no guarantee they won't go the way of MySpace as a bigger and better streaming service comes along and takes their place. And with the amount of competitors right now looking to knock them off their pedestal, we might just see that happen.